Welcome, Carolina Panther fans. This is Cat Scratch Playback.
Today on Playback, we bring you a special report on Cam Newton's ankle surgery and recovery with our guest, Dr. Jene Bramel. It's May 2nd, 2014, and this is Episode 3.
All right, Panther fans everywhere are biting their nails out of concern about Cam Newton's ankle surgery and what that means for this season's prospects. Now, any sort of little disturbance in the force when it comes to our offense drives Panther fans just up a wall because, well, let's face it, it looks like with our receiving core and our offensive line influx, it's a work in progress. Now, with that, I'd like to introduce Playback's very first guest, Dr. Jene Bramel. Now, Dr. Bramel has been practicing medicine for over a decade and is a great football mind in his own right. He also serves as a sideline physician for high school football teams where he sees all manners of sports injuries. He's written for the New York Times Fifth Down blog and is a regular contributor on the Audible podcast and has an injury update blog over at footballguys.com called The Second Opinion. Dr. Jene, a big welcome from Panther Nation and thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule and joining us on the show.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks very much, Jason.
You bet. So I've been a great admirer of your work for a long time and excited to finally get you on the show. Now, Dr. Jene, on the 18th of March, I noticed that you had a piece on your Second Opinion blog entitled Thoughts on Cam Newton's Ankle Surgery. And a few days ago over at Cat Scratch reader, Brian Beversluis wrote a similar article. And I want to dig further into this issue and some more and see if you can shed some more light on Cam's injury. Now, just a little background. According to some reports, this injury has been sort of a lingering one and one that he's been nursing since his college days. It's something that he would rehab during the off-season, kind of get it sort of okay, good enough to play on, and, he'd limp through the season. However, this year, when he tried to rehab it, it just didn't quite take, and next thing you know, Cam is under the knife. Now, Dr. Bramel, help us feel better. Cut to the quick. Is Cam going to be okay?
Yeah, I think he's probably going to be okay. I think what we're hearing is that he had some stretching in the ligaments, a number of ankle sprains, as you say, since college time. He had another one in that playoff game against San Francisco there, and just wasn't able to rehab it to his satisfaction. But, the procedure that we're hearing he's had from Dr. Anderson down there in Charlotte was a fairly simple, and no surgery is simple, but a fairly simple as ankle surgeries go, tightening of the ligament procedure, and the outlook for those, especially an elite athlete with an elite surgeon and an elite rehab crew like the Panthers have down there, should be just fine.
So let's talk a little bit more about the nature of his injury and exactly what goes on in this procedure.
I think, everything we're hearing suggests that he's just had a number of run-of-the-mill ankle sprains. And every time that happens, you have stretching of the ligaments, usually on the outside of the ankle. These seem like fairly typical outside of the ankle sprains like you might get if you came down on somebody's foot while you were playing basketball. And when that happens, generally the ligaments will tighten up themselves, but each time they get a little bit more loose, and depending on the exact grade of the sprain and how severe it is, sometimes they don't come back all the way. And for a mobile quarterback like Cam Newton, both inside and outside the pocket, that becomes an issue when he wants to move laterally, when he wants to plant and go, and when he wants to drive the ball down the field. So this may have been something that he's been considering surgery for a number of years now, but he was able to rehab it just well enough to decided, I think I'm good to go for this season. Whereas this year, after a number of weeks, it became clear to him that if he wanted to get through a season pain-free, that he ought to have the surgery and see if he can tighten things up.
So what you're telling us is Cam Newton is a $6 million man, and we have the technology to rebuild him.
There's more and more technology to rebuild all these guys. Adrian Peterson, Rob Gronkowski. I think there's a lot of these $6 million men that we're trying to rebuild over the past couple of years.
Well, he's probably going to be worth more than $6 million in the next year or two.
True.
But you're making me feel better and better over here. Tell me about what some of the long-term possible concerns are, especially since this is something that has kind of drug on for a little bit.
So the risk is how much damage has been done to those ligaments, how easy it is to repair them and tighten them up. In other words, will the surgery be successful? And that's probably not a big concern. If you look through some of the studies, and certainly in Dr. Anderson's hands, he should be at the top of the list as far as guys that you'd be able to expect to perform this surgery well. The success rate is 90 to 95%, and that's high-demand athletes, all comers. A guy like Cam, elite athlete. Again, everything that we talked about, Dr. Anderson and that rehab team, I think the success rate would be at least that high. Now, the concern is, as you said, this has been going on since college, so this is a 4 or 5 year issue. And with the chronic looseness in the joint, with the pain that he's had off and on, you have to wonder whether or not there's already some arthritis in that joint. If that's there, again, tightening the ligament's going to help. Will it shorten his career? It's possible. Will it shorten his career by many years? I think it's impossible to say. But I think given what we've seen from Cam Newton over the past couple of years and knowing how this off-season procedure has kind of worked its way into the mix here, I don't think I'd be too concerned just yet about any major long-term concerns.
Last year, we had the ghost of John Fox haunting the Panthers organization. With the John Stewart ankle injury. He's day-to-day. He's been day-to-day for the entire season. Why do you think this is a different situation and the Panthers aren't just playing possum with Cam?
Well, the first reassuring thing is that both the team and everybody around the team seems to be suggesting to the media that it was a tightening of the ligaments procedure. What we heard last year was that they were just going to address Jonathan Stewart's ankles. We didn't get a lot of specifics, and it became evident to me as the late spring and summer progressed, when Stewart wasn't running yet, when if it was simple ankle procedure that you'd normally expect to be cleaned up in maybe a month, 6 weeks, 8 to 12 weeks at the worst is where I think we're going to be with Cam, even though he's saying we're not going to see him back until training camp. I think this particular procedure you can expect kind of a 12 to 14 week rehab. But once we got past that point with Stewart last year and we heard he wasn't running, one of the concerns you have with these high ankle sprains and otherwise is there's some cartilage issue there, and the number of times that Jonathan Stewart had ankle issues and kind of non-specific ankle issues, you had to start to wonder, at least I did, was this a cartilage thing? Did they do a microfracture procedure on that ankle? And the further we went, I think it was 8 or 9 months before he got to the point where he was able to run comfortably. I don't think we're hearing that with Cam yet. So I think that's, for Panthers fans, that's what you want to know. Are there delays in his rehab? Do we hear that? Are there delays in him getting back in that first couple of weeks of training camp? If we're hearing those things, then I think maybe we have to start thinking about this procedure and Cam Newton's long-term outlook in a little bit different light. But for now, I think the early going, what we heard with Jonathan Stewart and what we're hearing with Cam Newton, I think we're dealing with two different issues.
You were definitely one of the first ones I heard to sort of raise a red flag about Jonathan Stewart last year, and that just goes to show all the great work you guys do over at Football Guys. If you're a big fan of fantasy football like I am, or if you're just a football geek, you really owe it to yourself to head on over to Football Guys. And hey, you can start by listening to their free audio podcast, The Audible, and you can hear Dr. Gene and the whole gang laying down knowledge. So if you're a serious football fan, make sure you head on over to Football Guys, get your subscription, support the work that they're doing over there. Now, Gene, what is the best way for people to reach you that want to follow you on the internet?
Well, I think you can do a couple of different things. One, you can follow me on Twitter. It's at Jene Bramel, JeneBramel. I'm usually there talking a little bit about fantasy football, but primarily about injuries and football injuries in general. And you can also see what we write at Football Guys at footballguys.com. Our website is open throughout the off season. There's a lot of good content up there right now. Yes, we do focus on fantasy football, but we tend to come at it from a football perspective. So we're watching film, we're talking to folks in the media, we're doing our own analysis, and then applying it to fantasy football. So, we're not fantasy football guys, we're football guys. And hopefully, if you guys haven't been a chance to check us out yet, that'll be evident to you when you come and see how we do things.
Absolutely. That's one of the great inspirations for this podcast and one of the reasons this show exists. So thanks for all the great work you guys are doing over there.
Well, we appreciate it. Thanks very much, Jason.
Thanks for joining us, Gene, and hopefully have you on soon.
Looking forward to it.
Thanks.